Good afternoon. It is Tuesday, July 2nd. I'm Yumna Naufal. These are today's headlines. Hezbollah should reconsider the policy it has towards Lebanon. Saudi Ambassador Ali Awad Al-Sidi says, voicing his country's concern over recent clashes. The Lebanese army clashes with gunmen in Tripoli overnight, wounding 4 people. And Obama calls Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi to warn him that the voices of all Egyptians must be heard as a political crisis escalates on the ground. Hezbollah should reconsider the policy it has towards the Sunni sect, Saudi Ambassador Ali Awad Al-Sidi said, voicing his country's concern over clashes in different parts of Lebanon. Saudi Arabia has serious concerns over clashes moving throughout different Lebanese regions, from Tripoli to Akkad and Arsail and Saida, which are directly linked to the Hezbollah's involvement in the events in Syria. Al-Sidi said that the delicate stage Lebanon is going through requires a great deal of wisdom and insight, adding that the wise among all sects should have the chance to play a salvation role that will get the country out of its crisis. Al-Sidi met with Free Patriotic Movement leader MP Michel Aoun in a rare encounter between the two figures. Ties between Aoun and Riyadh have been strained ever since the lawmaker broke his alliance with the March 14 coalition and backed the Hezbollah-led March 8 camp. The Lebanese army clashed with gunmen in the northern city of Tripoli overnight, wounding 4 people, according to security sources. The sources said a 75-year-old resident also died after inhaling smoke from a supermarket that caught during the fight. They said the clashes broke out around 9 p.m. after gunmen hurled a hand grenade at a Lebanese army post in Jemaizate, near Abdel Hamid Karami Square, better known as An-Nur Square. Fighting came to a halt around midnight after the army managed to wrest control of An-Nur Square while gunmen fled to side streets. The fighting around Jemaizate followed clashes that erupted after dozens of gunmen on motorcycles fired shots in the air to protest the arrest of Ghali Hadara by army intelligence. Hadara is believed to be a supporter of Sheikh Ahmed al-Asir, whose whereabouts remain unknown following a June 23rd army crackdown on his headquarters in Abra near Saida. U.S. Deputy Secretary of State William Burns told President Michel Sleiman that the U.S. administration would speed up military help as the Lebanese army plays a key role in maintaining internal peace and stability. Burns conveyed to Sleiman a message of support from President Barack Obama and U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry on his efforts to preserve stability and Beirut's self-dissociation policy towards the conflict in Syria.
It is deeply in the self-interest of all Lebanese to exercise restraint and respect for Lebanon's stability and security, to defend the institutions of the state, and to preserve Lebanon's democratic traditions. The decisions to delay elections scheduled for this year and boycott the Constitutional Council shake the confidence of the international community in Lebanon's institutions. More importantly, these actions undermine the faith of the Lebanese people in their own government. Despite its membership in the Lebanese government, Hezbollah has decided to put its own interests and those of its foreign backers above those of the Lebanese people. We condemn, in the strongest terms, Hezbollah's actions in Syria. They directly contradict the organization's commitment to the Babda Declaration, stand in direct violation of Lebanon's disassociation policy, and place the future of Lebanon at risk. We call on all parties to respect the disassociation policy and preserve Lebanese stability and unity. We recognize the enormous burden the conflict in Syria places on Lebanon. The way in which the Lebanese government and people have so generously opened their homes, schools, and communities to over 500,000 Syrian refugees has inspired us all. Last week, President Obama announced an additional $300 million in humanitarian assistance for Syria and its neighbors. The single largest portion of these funds, $72 million, will help refugees in Lebanon and their host communities. We will continue to work with other donors and partners to ensure that the international community provides Lebanon with the urgent humanitarian and development assistance it needs.
A car bomb rocked a district of the Syrian capital Damascus overnight, injuring several members of the security forces, according to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. The watchdog said a large explosion apparently caused by an explosive device placed inside a car rocked the district of Kfar Sousa. The rebel brigade, Liwa Sham, claimed responsibility for the blast in a video uploaded to YouTube late on Monday. Two members of the group said its fighters on the ground targeted a group of senior officers responsible for crimes of the Assad regime. They said in a statement with the names of those targeted would be released later. A second video uploaded several hours later by the rebel brigade showed the blast filmed from across a highway at some distance from the explosion site. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said that his meeting with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has made progress on plans to hold a Syrian peace conference and that both sides had agreed it should be held soon. We narrowed down some of the options with respect to the potential of the conference. We both agreed that the conference should happen sooner rather than later, Kerry told reporters in Brunei, where he is attending an Asian regional security meeting. Washington and Moscow have been trying since May to organize an international peace conference to bring rebels and representatives of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's government to the negotiating table. Coming up next, spying between allies is not unusual, according to a French former intelligence officer. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Opponents of Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi continue an all-night celebration in Tahrir Square after the army gave the Islamist president a 48-hour deadline to compromise with protesters. The deadline comes after Morsi's liberal opponents brought millions out onto the streets to demand that he steps down and that early presidential elections be held. President Mohamed Morsi has rebuffed an army ultimatum to find a resolution to Egypt's political crisis, saying that he has not been consulted and will pursue his own plans for national reconciliation. Morsi described the 48-hour deadline set on Monday by the head of the armed forces for him to agree on a common platform with liberal rivals as confusing. The protests have drawn at least 14 million people into the streets, with a large number of them demanding Morsi's resignation. In a statement issued at nearly 2 a.m. this morning, 9 hours after General Abdel Fattah al-Sisi delighted Morsi's opponents by effectively ordering the president to heed the demands of demonstrators, the president's office used considerably less direct language. It said the president of the republic was not consulted about the statement issued by the armed forces. And U.S. President Barack Obama called on the president to negotiate with the opposition on the day that the military called on the two sides to cease violence and reach an agreement. Obama, speaking at a joint news conference with his host, President Jakaya Kikwete, while on a visit to Tanzania, tried to reassure also European allies affronted by reports of U.S. spying, but suggested all the world's intelligence services were involved in finding out the thinking of opponents and allies alike.
To create the conditions in which everybody feels that their voices are heard and that the government is responsive and truly representative. And so what we've encouraged the government to do is to reach out to the opposition and work through these issues in a political process. It's not the U.S.'s job to determine what that process is, but what we have said is go through processes that are legitimate and observe rule of law.
Italian Prime Minister Enrico Letta visited Jerusalem's Yad Vashem Holocaust Museum at the start of a two-day visit to the region. He later met Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and at the start of the meeting, Netanyahu reaffirmed Israel's willingness to restart negotiations with the Palestinians. Netanyahu said, quote, "We want peace. I want peace. We want to restart peace negotiations as soon as possible without any obstacles. We have to get into the tent and stay in the tent and seek to end the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. That is our goal." Center-left Prime Minister Enrico Letta, who was nominated in April, is visiting Israel as the first country out of Europe. Letta is scheduled to travel to the West Bank to meet Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas later on. He is a perceived right-wing presence in his center-left Democratic Party, and he has been critical of Israeli settlement activity in the West Bank, emulating the European Union's repeated condemnations of expansion plans. Afghani security officials have said that at least 6 people have been killed at a NATO compound in the Afghani capital of Kabul in an attack claimed by the Taliban. Kabul Provincial Police Chief Mohammad Ayub Salanji said the attackers detonated a car bomb at the compound gate on Tuesday morning before attacking guards with small arms fire. Salanji said 2 truck drivers working for the foreign logistics company and 4 Nepalese guards were killed in the attack. He said 3 other employees were wounded. It all began when one of the fighters drove an explosive-laden truck into a vehicle bay in the compound north of Kabul airport, detonating an explosion that left a crater 6 meters deep and about 15 meters wide. The Taliban, in an emailed statement from Zabihullah Mujahid, the group's spokesman, claimed responsibility for the attack and said its fighters had entered what it described as an important foreign base and logistics warehouse. Now for news around the world in brief. Ailing anti-apartheid hero and former South African President Nelson Mandela remains in hospital in a critical but stable condition. He has been in a Pretoria hospital for more than 3 weeks now, receiving treatment for a recurring lung infection, his 4th hospitalization in 6 months. Hundreds of well-wishers have continued to bring cards, flowers, balloons, artworks, and posters in tribute to Mandela. The hospital wall outside has been adorned with flags from various countries, some bearing pictures of him. And while he lies in hospital, many South Africans are looking ahead of his 95th birthday on July 18th. The United Nations takes over command of an African peacekeeping force in Mali, bolstering the mission in a country still threatened by militants and weeks away from what analysts warn could be chaotic elections. The transfer of command will bring in soldiers from beyond Africa and eventually see the operation more than double in size. Western and regional powers want to keep order in the West African country after a tumultuous 18 months when soldiers toppled the president and Al-Qaeda-linked rebels seized the desert north. And Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro said that Caracas had not yet received an official request for political asylum from former U.S. spy agency contractor Edward Snowden and would decide on the matter only when it did. Maduro voiced sympathy for Snowden, who divulged details of Washington's spy program and described him as a champion of human rights. That suggested Venezuela may help the 30-year-old who is stranded in Moscow after flying there from Hong Kong on June 23rd to find a safe harbor. Spying between allies is not unusual, a French former intelligence officer said, following the latest revelation of alleged U.S. spying, which has raised concern among many EU politicians. On Saturday, German news magazine Der Spiegel said that the National Security Agency had bugged EU offices and gained access to EU internal computer networks. Claude Moniquet, who worked as a French spy for 20 years and now runs an intelligence consultancy firm, said the revelations did not come as a surprise.
In France, in Germany and so on, the intelligence services send a lot of reports, of course secret reports, to the policymakers, the government and so on. So to be surprised today, it could be a little bit naive, it could be also an hypocrisy, or it means that you never read the reports of your intelligence services, which is a possibility actually. Country has allies and interests, and so those interests must be protected and defended. The Europeans must protect, of course, their interests and their industry. But it's normal that the US want to know about this. And I think that in the other way, I'm quite sure that some European countries, certainly Germany and France, for instance, and certainly France, are spying the United States when they can.
This marks the end of our bulletin. Let me remind you of our headlines. Hezbollah should reconsider its policy it has towards Lebanon, according to Saudi Ambassador Ali Awad al-Sidi, voicing his country's concern over recent clashes. The Lebanese army clashes with gunmen in Tripoli overnight, wounding 4 people. And Obama calls on Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi to warn him that the voices of all Egyptians must be heard as a political crisis escalates on the ground. Those are your Tuesday headlines live on Future Television in Beirut. I'm Yumna Naufal, wishing you all a good night.